All right, it's me again. It is not raining, so that's good. I'm standing down in a creek here. All right, and this is the same creek that I showed you last time, and I told you the farther down you go, the bigger it gets, and you can see that's definitely true. But I'm down here. I'm out trying to burn off some steam, and I got a animal trail right here. I got a couple questions we can do here. When we talked about our unit on fossils, we talked about when an animal leaves a footprint like that. All right, we all know what that is. That's a deer track. When an animal leaves a footprint like that, if that footprint turned into a hardened material, first of all, what would that be called? It is a concave print, where it is indented and just leaves that mark like a footprint. So that's one type. And then the other one would be if sediment filled that imprint and turned it into a fossil, it would be a different kind. So that's question one, is what is the one that is hollowed out and forms a, I can't do it without saying the answer now, I say the answer, that makes a solid material. And then the second one is if that hollow print filled in with sediment and fossilized, what type of fossil would that make? All right, so that's two. Now the third thing we can talk about here is when I'm down in this creek, the animals are crossing right here for a reason. All right, if you watch, the lay of the land is very steep around here. But we know that from our social studies unit we did on the lay of the land and those types of lines that we talked about, that animals always choose the path of least resistance. So this is the only spot where it all funnels down here, all right, where they can get across the creek fairly easily here. What type of lines are those called? I would take two answers for this. You learn to read a what kind of map. It starts with a T, all right? So it's either that kind of map or those kind of lines, or it's also another way you could say it starts with a C, all right? And there's certain types of lines that follow the lay of the land. But we talked about it, and when we did the onX map thing, where we would mark on the nature trail where you see what you thought would be the best game trails and things like that based off of what we learned by these types of lines, and then we would mark it and we'd go out and check and see if we were right. All right, so you can tell here where I'm standing, I'm in a very low spot. I'm in a valley, all right? And the animals are gonna come through here because it's the path of least resistance. So that's question one and question two. See ya. All right, me again. So I'm out here, actually I'm out here trespassing on Lexi, your grandma's land, and Lucas, your grandma's land. Just kidding, I called and asked her if I could come walk over here. So this area of McCoy's is is a cool spot to me. It's basically a big grassy area that they planted just in the last couple years. They've planted a native blend in here. It's supposed to be a pollinator mix, but there's lots of grasses and forbs, which are weeds, and all these little plants that are coming up. And what this is a prime example of, this is red osier dogwood right here. It could actually be silky dogwood if I break this off and look on the inside. Yep, so that is silky dogwood, I believe, is yellow on the inside. But anyway, this area is what much of the Great Plains are or were and should be. And these types of environments like this have a specific name. So we have forest land, we have mountains, those kinds of things. What is a solid mix of grass like this called? Pretty common sense what it is. But this type of ecosystem is best controlled, so I guess this would be number three. What type of terrain is this? So not a forest, it's not a mountain, it's not like coastal land. What is a sea of grass like this? But this type of environment is one of the easiest to control. Unfortunately, in our world anymore, it's not used very often. But fire is what controls these types of native, I almost said the answer. I'd take two different ones too. One is a two-part word and the other one is just a single word. But fire, when you run through this, right now, what they're trying to do is get the grasses and forbs to come up, the native grasses. But this kind of stuff, where these dogwood bushes and young species, there's little locust trees coming up in here, lots of different early pioneer type plants coming up in this, and when they send fire through it, it resets that. And the other day we talked about succession, and this restarts the succession on this prairie. And when it restarts it, it kills out anything native, and then all these things are great browse. You can see this one I stopped right here. Each top of one of these little shrubs is eaten off because the deer love that woody browse like that. But the fire resets that and starts it again and starts that succession over again. We talked about secondary succession and we talked about primary succession. And this is secondary succession because we're not going all the way back to rock, right? And that was a question on the assignment the other day, so I'm going back to that. I'm climbing a mountain here, basically, so I'm old and out of shape. So if I start gasping for air, forgive me. But you can see all that starting to come up here. And that orange over there, that's kind of native prairie grass. Some of this is not. This is what was planted. It's like a cool season brome type plant. But eventually it'll take off with all that prairie grass and these young little bushes and stuff. And they'll continue to burn it or mow it to try to restart the succession on it. But this type of landscape is called blank. And I've said it once. So it could be a two-part word or a one-part word. It either starts with a P or a G. The G one has two words. I gotta quit giving you guys such obvious answers. But again, you're still learning. I'm just giving you answers, but you're still learning. And you're watching, so anyway. All right, we're on number 4 now. So I made it up to the top of Mount McCoy here, and I found right here, this is a hole of probably a coyote den or something. But when we talked about classifying different animals, you classify things because, like when we talked about the plant kingdom, there's just a gazillion different types of plants, and you have to have ways to classify them to keep them organized. Although I think the people that named the plants are ridiculous because there's crazy names, especially the scientific names. But anyway, that hole right there belongs to a type of animal that we could classify in one way. And what is a type of animal that hunts other animals? It's not a carnivore. I mean, it would be a carnivore, but that's not the name that I'm looking for. It's a type of animal, though, that does hunt other animals. So that one is probably a coyote, and it lives in that den there, or it could be something else. But regardless, what is it when it hunts other animals? All right, it's raining again, and I don't have my life-proof cover on my phone, but I'm back home. I'm going to I got 2 more questions. I have no idea what number we're on. I'm gonna make up a number. We're on 4 or 5. There are 2 types of, there's a tissue that helps support plants and give them their food and their water. This type of tissue starts with a V. All right, now what is the type of tissue? And then there are 2 types of that tissue. I'm not going to say the answer. And one takes the food from the leaves into the rest of the plant. Now that one, you just kind of got to go with the flow. Science joke. And hint there. And then the other it takes things from the roots on up to the rest of the plant. Mainly the water and stuff up to the rest of the plant. So, so the first question on that one was, what is the name of that type of tissue that supports the plants and carries the food and water and nutrients? And then the second two were the one that takes the food from the leaves into the rest of the plant, and then takes the water from the bottom up into the rest of the plant. So that one starts with an X. But it doesn't really sound like it starts with an X. All right, so that's the end of that. Now, as you can tell in Mr. D fashion, I'm totally winging this. I came back here at my house. I have this little planting bed here that I put seeds in, and I literally just take acorns and whatever else and stick it down into the bed here, and I put these hay bales around it, and then every year once they grow, I knock the hay bales down and can just pull the whole root and everything out of the plant. And then down there I got a bunch of potted trees that I've kept in there. This is my little garden sink that I clean. That was for you, Lacey. That's my best TikTok flop thing that I know how to do.